Hello, welcome to the latest edition of Data in the Hallway, here with my co-host Daniel. How are you, Daniel? Good to see you.
Hello.
Cool. And for this episode, we're excited to welcome Yaniv Ben Hemo, joining us from Israel. He's a co-founder of Superstream. I want to talk about this. It's a relatively new company and what you're doing. So thanks for coming us on so that we can talk about new technologies and database. So, and just first of all, like introduce yourself and tell us what SuperStream is. So,
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. Superstream is a platform that designed to improve and optimize Kafka clusters of any type or any vendor to ultimately reduce its total cost of ownership, reduce costs, improve performance, increase reliability, and a bunch of other benefits. But that would be the core benefits, and ultimately you gain all these benefits without replacing your existing Kafka or changing the vendor or the deployment. So that's us.
cool. Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of people heard of Kafka. I mean, we had another like a guest on a few episodes ago, CGA from Street Native. We talked about Kafka and other Apache projects. So, this is a very broad question, and you kind of address it like a total cost of ownership, like to some extent manageability. Kafka's been a very successful project and it's been around for a long time, but how would you sort of categorize like what are sort of the key pain points that a lot of Kafka users are experiencing today? Like,
Right. I think that over the course of like 4 years, we've been seeing a lot of improvement around user experience, manageability, operational complexities that really got improved with the rise of the managed services around Kafka, like Confluent, Red Panda, and others. And also, we started to see like the rise of Kubernetes alongside Kafka and Kafka operators or Kubernetes operators for Kafka that really aids the deployment and maintenance and the entire lifecycle management of Kafka. So that part is, I don't want to say like off the way, but definitely became much easier than it was. And nowadays, I think that we are on the day 2 or even day 3 challenges of Kafka, which is like how to keep it cost efficient, how to squeeze the resources of your clusters, whether are you using like self-hosted or a standalone bare metal Kafka cluster, not just the serverless one. How to make sure that the entire that as your data grows, your entire platform or environment stays cost efficient, performant, and reliable. So these are the challenges I think that really born out of the scale that we are facing and working right now. So it started from the management aspect and how to make or keep this thing alive, and now it's like we already passed that. Now how to make sure that we're not bankrupt out of because of the usage of Kafka and making sure that as we scale, other vital metrics scale as well.
right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think like I forget the exact age of Kafka, but I mean you kind of like a reference like other technologies like Kubernetes that's been developed since like Kafka was first introduced. So they certainly help, but I would imagine these different technologies environments like add complexity as well. So yeah,
Definitely,
yeah.
and I mean, and the cool thing about that is, I I I think that there is a direct correlation between adoption rate to the decrease of complexities and entry barriers, right? So
Mhm.
Kubernetes at first, it was like, who would want to use that in compared to Docker Swarm or Docker containers, right? It was super simple to run that in compared to you have a different language, a different set of components and architecture that you need to adapt to. And so when it became much more mature and the complexity is lower down and GUI, the different management platforms started to rise, so was the adoption of Kubernetes. And nowadays it's like, right, there is no company in any stage, in any size that doesn't have Kubernetes, and it's the same path or the same journey that I think Kafka faced or experienced. So we started with the self-hosted Kafka, bare metal, Zookeeper, a lot of different components that needs to communicate with each other, and a lot of complicated, messy components that needs to be kept alive and also to scale. And nowadays, with all the managed services, and again the operators and the automations and the tools that arise around it, you see the adoption rate like exponential, right? Every second company nowadays have Kafka or at least some sort of a message broker.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I mentioned a little earlier, I mean, Superstream, I'm sorry, Superstream is a relatively new company. So when did your company get started? Tell I love hearing about sort of the origin story. So tell us about how you got started in the early days.
Yeah, so we started, like, us four co-founders, we are four partners in total. So we started back in, like, our journey together back in 2021. And we've been working a lot with Kafka. It was clear to us that it empowers the next evolution of data, the movement between batch to streaming. And it was very clear to us that in order to empower the next scale or era of data, Kafka and streaming in general needs to be much more cost efficient, uh, much more, much faster, much more cost efficient, and definitely much more easier to manage. And so we started our official journey. The research started in 2021. The official journey as a company started back in 2022, with the same problem statement as I just stated, like making Kafka much more cheaper, faster, and easier to manage. But the way that we thought to tackle that was through replacing it. So building the next generation of Kafka or a different message broker. And so we started an open source project called Memphis Dev, which was a great success through the community and the open source community, with a decent amount of contributors and stars and adoption. But then we realized back in mid 2023 that it's a great open source project, but it's built on the wrong protocol. The protocol should be Kafka. That's the first thing, in order for much more rapid adoption, I would say. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we felt that, right, like there is a room for a tool like Memphis Dev, but actually the world, like the bigger companies, the bigger challenges needs their existing Kafka to be improved and their existing Kafka to be much more cheaper, faster, and easier to manage. And so we gave the project to the open source community under the Apache 2.0 license, and we stayed with the same problem statement, but thought about a different angle, but came up with a different angle to solve that, which is basically Superstream. So that's, by the way, the correlation between also us and Memphis Dev, and that's how we started.
Cool. Yeah, I think like when I first saw your LinkedIn profile, I mean Memphis Dev, I didn't know like exactly what it was, but that's like a project that I've heard of in the past. So I mean, I think my guess is a lot of listeners will feel the same way. They may have heard of it. So yeah, I mean, thanks for clarifying the
That's
relationship. So yeah,
that's the coolest thing ever. Like,
yeah,
for a builder, as a
yeah.
developer, like I'm a software developer since basically all my life,
Hmm.
and as a builder, hearing someone that heard your project, not even tested or tried it,
Right.
but heard the project and heard good feedback on that, that's awesome. So thank you. Yeah.
Cool. So I believe like I think I looked at your repo, Memphis repo. It is still like a project that's I don't think you actively maintain it, but it's still available for people to take a look at and utilize if they want to. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
By us, it's like
Yeah.
Rarely we maintain the project,
Hmm.
mainly approve pull requests and still maintain the Discord channel, which is great. So
Oh, okay. Cool.
All right.
Cool.
So um, with Superstream, so what kind of things are you doing exactly with Kafka that makes it more cost effective? Is it like right sizing the Kafka cluster, maybe other things?
So bunch of stuff. It starts with us continuously analyzing your clusters. So it's in order to optimize your clusters, that thing needs to be like an ongoing action, an ongoing activity. In compared to database, I always compare like Kafka to a database because some people tend to think that Kafka is some sort of like a real-time database. It is a database. It's not a database. I think that behavioral wise or usage wise, they are very different components where a database is just usually it's like something that you constantly pile more and more data into it, and Kafka is more temporary behavior,
Mm.
as a more temporary behavior. So the way that we do that is we connect to your Kafka like any other client through its admin API, continuously analyze it and identify inactive partitions, inactive topics, idle CGs, idle connection, finding out of retention topics, and configurations at the cluster level that might not suitable for the type of workload that you are having at the moment. So it's a continuous thing. We will always iterate and try to find a better configuration for the existing or current workload. So that's one aspect of that. And then we also enable to remediate and to fix those optimizations through the console itself, through Superstream. So Superstream will basically identify and also fix the optimizations that it surface. It's sort of like a to-do list. You constantly get new tasks in it, and it can be supervised or unsupervised. So you can decide if like Superstream can just take its own actions and continuously do that on behalf of you in the background. And it goes all the way to the clients themselves. So we also provide, it's not mandatory, but we also provide a client library in all the major popular languages that basically replace your existing Kafka library, which it's exactly identical to the existing Kafka library that you are using. It's mainstream code, mainstream Kafka clients SDK. So nothing is changed. You don't need to change anything in your code. You just replace the dependency or the package. And from there, we are able to control your properties at the client level. So if we're talking about the producer, we're talking about the linger MS and bet size, the consumer side, the bet size, and the fetch min max, and other buffers and timers that basically enable us to increase the efficiency of your clients and increase their throughput without adding more replicas, without adding more hardware or resources. Yeah, it's free benefits that were simply there, but you just don't have the capacity or the scale to go to each and every individual application and tune it based on its workload.
Yeah, and I assume it doesn't really matter what kind of data format you're using in Kafka, if it's Avro or anything else.
Great question. First of all, no, we don't care about the data itself. But that's another optimization that we surface. So if we, for example, identify topics with a non-binary format, meaning JSON, for example, and not Avro protobuf, we will first surface that. So show you the topics that are not that do not have binary format like Avro or protobuf, and also transform or convert the payload from the client side, from the producer side, to protobuf or Avro to your choice.
That's quite a nice feature.
Yes, that's one of our secret sauce. You don't need to declare any schemas. You don't need to care about schemas at all. You just you just click on a toggle button, and all of a sudden your producers are producing protobuf and not JSONs. And that immediately cut your payload size by 50%, 60% without almost without any trade-offs.
Cool. So, I mean, so do you have like examples like uh, from user bases or customers that are, I mean, no one uses just like a single database, right? But I mean, do you have examples of your users or customers that are, that work with like a SQL-based database, for example, more traditional databases, how they're getting benefits from using Superstream? Like, hope that question makes sense, but yeah,
It does.
yeah,
It
yeah.
does. I mean, it makes sense more to I would say the future vision of Superstream, which the way that we see it is like sort of like an assembly line, right? Kafka is just the entry point, but what happens to the data afterwards? And there are a bunch of other components in that assembly line that can be optimized as well, both in the data level, but also at the application or infrastructure level of the next stop, the next checkpoint of the data. So directly right now, I mean, there is a correlation between the payload that we are entering or reducing, or that being reduced by Superstream into Kafka, and then from there to, for example, like S3 or any other database that the data will flow to, but not directly with Superstream, I would say. But we're definitely aware to the other aspects of the assembly line of data pipelines and data ingestion in general.
Well, no, that completely makes sense. Uh, so, uh, so obviously, SuperStream as a company has been around for about a year, I guess. Like, you mentioned, I think
Right.
you mentioned like the 2023 or a little earlier. So, what are some of the challenges that you plan on like working on over the next year or so as your company continues to evolve? Like, what are like some of the like features that your customers you're talking to your customers about? What are some of your immediate plans that you can share with us?
Right. So
Yeah.
definitely more work on the application side, on the client side.
Mhm.
At first, when we just started to touch the clients and to address the issues that the clients are facing. The clients, I mean, the producers and consumers that interact with Kafka. We thought at first that it will be too sensitive for the customers to allow us to go into from various factors, but simply like the pains are not big enough. And what we found out is that the biggest pains, the biggest bottlenecks, the biggest single point of failure actually resides on the applications and clients. So we're definitely going to double down on that beside optimizing the broker itself. And it will continue, as I said, like to the rest of the components of the assembly line. If we're already doing significant work on Kafka and optimizing that part in the assembly line, will definitely going to move forward and deeper to the data lake, to object storage, to data warehouses, and continue the flow. So it won't be just one single point or one single component in the entire assembly line that gets optimized, but rather the entire assembly line, the entire pipeline. So that would be our plan for 2025.
Cool. I appreciate that. And so for like community members in TiDB or others, if they want to learn more, what's the best place to sort of get started? Like I think I read through some of your documentation pages, but if people were to get started to sort of kick the tires, well, what would be a good one or two places to start? Like,
The only thing that I think I miss in Superstream right now is that we are less open source. Unfortunately, I mean
mhm,
it's really like oriented for more like mature companies
mhm.
that already face some scale in Kafka and feel the pains that we are solving. So it's a less comfy place, I would say. But at the same time, if we want to take it to the practical side, our documentation and blog, the blog is like our learning center. We just throw our ideas, we throw a bunch of tutorials. I'm a huge fan of practical educational articles and tutorials. So we try, we do our best to put a lot of materials there, and also our YouTube channel, which also contains a lot of useful materials from Memphis Dev period, like how to build CDC pipelines and connect bunch of components together to create like an event-driven architecture. And so I would say documentation, blog, and YouTube channel, definitely.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be sure to list those in the episode description, so people that are
Thank you.
listening or watching on YouTube, they can certainly check that out. So cool. Daniel, did you have anything that you wanted to ask? So I think you were trying to deal with some audio issues on your end, but go ahead. So, whoops. I think you're still muted, but whoops. All right. I mean, you can just text a question to me, I guess, and then I'll try to read it. Like it's always like you just never know with like a Bluetooth and audio technology these days. But cool. So, I mean, how big is your company, Yaniv? Like you mentioned, you started with like four co-founders. Like, how big is your operation today? Like,
Yeah, right. So
yeah.
today we are 14 team members
Okay.
across Israel, Europe, and the States.
Hmm.
And we're growing responsibly. And fortunately, we are able to fulfill all of our roadmap as well as our customers' demands. It's a very cozy and family
Right.
type of company, I would say.
No, I mean, 14 is a good size, and I wish you continued success. And like the early days are like always exciting. So,
Yeah,
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 I
for
mean, it's
sure.
kind of nice. You certainly know everybody in the company, right? So it's
Oh
and
yeah,
yeah.
that's great. I've been working in the past for Dell Technologies, which I admire, but
Mm,
it's a bit hard to know all the people there, right? 100,000
right.
people
Yeah.
um, in a company. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy with our size right now.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Awesome. So, yeah, I mean, so anything else you want to share with us before we ask our last, like a trivia question that we have for our guests? Like anything else on Superstream that you think is worth mentioning and I didn't ask you about?
Um, no, I mean, we just came back from Corinth. I mean, don't want to sound like salesy or advertising or something like that.
Hmm.
I mean, um, cloud costs are extremely high. Where you can reduce that, that's a great thing because I I take it to a more poetic way. I mean, the less spent on components, the more you can spend on human resources
Hmm.
or humans in general, or at least avoid maybe um, in in some points even layoffs or other cuts. So spend your efforts on that if possible. If you have good automation tools that can help you gain savings, increase margins, and help your company, that's always helpful and always welcome by the internal management as well. And we can help that with Kafka. So
I mean, I think that's a pretty common theme these days across, with different companies, like including us, like whether it's existing customers or new customers we talk about, like it's one of the things that people bring up in terms of optimizing their cloud costs. And, I think people think less of that when the economy is good, but that's not always the case, right? That period doesn't seem to last very long, unfortunately.
exactly,
Uh, yeah,
exactly,
right,
exactly. Become more cost aware. That's the way I do that.
right. Cool. All right. So, yeah, I mean, thanks for joining us. Like you mentioned, you were in Austin, Texas, at the current event. Now you flew across halfway around the world back home to Tel Aviv. So the last question we always ask our guests is tell us about where you are. I think you're the first guest we had from Israel, so like you don't have to worry about sort of repeating something previous guests have told us. But tell us something about like a Tel Aviv that people may not know. Like people, I mean, I haven't had a chance to visit Tel Aviv, unfortunately, but for somebody new that's visiting for the first time, like what are some of the things that you would like them to sort of check out?
Definitely food. Definitely food would be a cliche, but I mean the food is great, super diverse. So you have a bunch of different flavors and cuisine. So I would say food and taste as much as possible. And I mean the best one would be actually a vegetarian one. Yeah, which I mean saying the name would be a bit hard for people to write down, but it's called Frischmann. So bunch of pita bread and sandwiches that actually like vegetarians, but taste like taste like heaven. So really recommend to everyone that if it's your first time in Tel Aviv, you have to go there and try one.
Wow, cool. Well, appreciate that. Like a vegetarian food is not something I would have thought of when I thought of like Tel Aviv or Israel. So
No, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah,
Don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
You have great meat
no,
and
yeah,
fish and
yeah,
seafood and every type, but
yeah.
that would be an interesting one. Like
Okay,
you probably haven't eat that type of pita bread or
all
sandwich
right,
like that. So that would be
okay.
a special one.
Well, it sounds amazing. So hopefully I'll get a chance to visit and get to try it. Yeah, I've heard of like I think from people
Hopefully.
like good shawarma in Israel is one of the things that people tell me. But
Oh man,
yeah, cool,
yeah.
cool. All
Definitely. But again, you're familiar
right,
with it. Like you can eat that in Europe, right? You can eat
yeah,
that
right,
in, you know, in New York. But
yeah,
that the one that I mentioned,
all right,
interesting one.
cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. Hopefully you'll recover from your jet lag soon, and hope and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you noticed, like I think we had our booth at Current as well, but it's a big event. But hopefully we'll have a chance to cross paths somewhere at a conference or a different
I
event.
hope
So
so as well. I
yeah,
hope so as well. Thank you very
yeah.
much for the
Thank
opportunity
you.
to speak about Superstream and to get to know you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much.
Bye guys.